always been drawn to the mysteries hidden deep within nature. And as the cool autumn breeze whispered promises of untold secrets, she found herself standing at the threshold of the mountain of fear. The encircling landscape, a tangle of jagged cliffs and twisted ancient trees, beckoned her forward with a silent, eerie call. With every determined step taken onto the narrow, winding trails, the creeping mist wrapped itself like a spectral shroud, muting vibrant colors and softening the harsh outlines of reality. This was not merely a physical journey, but a soulful voyage that stirred the long-hidden fears simmering beneath her calm facade. The expedition began as a simple getaway from the mundane routines that filled Kaori's life, an attempt to reclaim the fragments of her past and find solace among nature's raw beauty. Accompanied by a small group of kindred spirits, each carrying personal burdens and secrets of their own, Kaori embraced the unknown with a mixture of trepidation and anticipation. Their camaraderie was palpable in shared smiles and hushed whispers. Yet an unspoken understanding told them that beyond the comfort of their unity lay the inherent danger of traversing a remote wilderness, one where the mountains themselves seemed to be alive with silent warnings. As dusk crept in, the sky transformed into a cloak of deep indigo, and an unexpected storm swiftly cast a pall over their journey. The sudden change of weather provided the perfect catalyst for the eerie transformation of the landscape, as the once familiar path melted into a labyrinth of spectral silhouettes. The forest, ordinarily a sanctuary of solace, turned ominous as fierce gusts of wind stirred the dense, unnatural fog, and unseen forces began to whisper fragments of a forgotten legend. For Clara and her companions, this was a harbinger, a portent that the mountain was no ordinary expanse of nature, but an ancient entity harboring secrets too dark to be revealed. With the veil of darkness settling like a heavy curtain, the group scattered along the narrow mountain trails, each forced to confront the overwhelming isolation imposed by the storm. Kaori, however, felt an unyielding compulsion to press onward, driven by both curiosity and a need to escape the oppressive memories of her past. Her path meandered through a maze of eroding stone and roots that twisted with a life of their own. Each step echoed against the silent sentinels of the forest. Unbeknownst to her, hidden markings and symbols emerged along the trail, a cryptic language carved by time and sorrow, silently chronicling the mountain's tragic history. In the eerie stillness that followed the tempest, Kaori discovered a series of small weathered diary entries tucked away in the hollow of an ancient oak. The fragile pages chronicled the anguished tale of a spirit wronged and bound to the mountain long ago. A being steeped in a desire for retribution, yet consumed by endless sorrow. The diary spoke of a ritual meant to placate the wretched soul whose laments echoed through the canyons, a plea for release from the chains of eternal torment. As Kaori read these sorrowful confessions, the realization dawned that her own journey was now intertwined with the haunting legacy of a cursed land. The foreboding landscape grew increasingly hostile as the natural world transformed under the oppressive weight of the curse. Every rustle in the underbrush, every distant sound that resonated in the chilling void, hinted at an unseen menace that stalked the shadows. Kaori's heart pounded as she navigated through passages of snow-laden boulders and precarious ledges, each step a delicate balance between survival and surrender to a darkness that defied explanation. The beauty of nature had given way to an atmosphere of palpable dread. as though the mountain itself was mourning the sins of the past with every gust of the relentless wind. As the night deepened, the isolation began to erode the resolve of each hiker, turning their minds inward and conjuring surreal nightmares that blended indistinguishably with reality. In isolated pockets of the mountainside, distant echoes of familiar voices morphed into ghostly chants, casting dark spectres on the psyche. Kaori, however, clung to fragments of hope and sanity, her rational mind fiercely engaged in deciphering the scattered clues that hinted at an answer to the haunting. Each sound, each shape in the darkness became a cipher to decode, and she resolved to uncover the history behind the inexplicable marks left on stone and bark alike. Moving further into the wilderness, Kaori began to notice that the natural order of the world was fracturing under the influence of this relentless supernatural presence. The twisted, gnarled trees reached out like grasping hands, their contorted shapes forming silhouettes that seemed to watch her every move with a malevolent intelligence. Amidst the constant flux of shadows and faint echoes, she felt as if the mountain's sorrowful past was reawakening, urging her to understand the tragic events that had given birth to such lingering malevolence. Slowly, fragments of a forgotten ritual began to coalesce in her mind, offering a glimmer of the potential resolution to the inexorable terror. A sudden, almost imperceptible shift in the wind carried with it a series of unearthly sounds that stirred something deep within Kaori. The cacophony of natural and supernatural elements converged in a symphony of dread, as if the forest was trying to communicate through its own ancient language. Every crack of a branch or rustle of leaves became a harbinger of impending revelations. Amidst the ethereal sounds and the surreal movements of the fog, she detected Patton's silent messages conveyed through nature's rhythms that both comforted and alarmed her. It was as though the very air was saturated with the sorrow and rage of bygone ages. In this grim ambience, the hikers found brief moments of respite in hidden alcoves beneath towering cliffs, where the relentless storm had carved out natural sanctuaries. Kaori sought solace in these rare interludes of calm, taking time to reflect upon the cryptic diary she had found and the enigmatic symbols that continued to appear along her path. The pages, stained and fragile, recounted an ancient tale of sacrifice and betrayal, a narrative that resonated profoundly with her own struggles against inner demons. Even as the oppressive atmosphere pressed in on all sides, Kaori discovered a strange comfort in the shared experiences of loss and longing that permeated both the diary and the desolate mountainside. On, the barrier between the physical and the paranormal began to blur, and each step further into the wilderness felt like a descent into a personal nightmare. Hushed whispers seemed to crawl from the very soil beneath her feet, forming a chorus of voices that recounted histories long forgotten. Kaori's footsteps echoed in the silence, each one a somber drumbeat of inevitability as she journeyed deeper into the cursed domain. The boundary between the tangible world and the realm of restless souls grew increasingly tenuous, leaving her to wonder if the mountain itself was a living memorial to countless tragedies that demanded their own reckoning. The relentless gloom of the mountain was punctuated by moments of inexplicable light, where the interplay of moonlight and shifting fog revealed haunting images carved into the landscape. Kaori noted how these spectral luminescences transformed natural features into grotesque effigies, each one silently pleading for liberation from the relentless curse. At these intersections of light and shadow, she began to notice a pattern, a cryptic message etched across rocks and trees, mystery of the cursed mountain. She spent long hours poring over the fragile diary entries and the mysterious symbols, determined to unlock the forgotten language of the ancients. In her solitude, punctuated by intermittent, disconcerting sounds in the dark, she began to interpret the symbols as both warnings and guides. The sorrow woven through the diary was echoed in every carved inscription, and it was clear that these were not random markings, but rather the desperate pleas of a tormented soul who once sought justice and redemption. A plea that now transcended time and reached out to her in the harsh language of the wilderness. The sinister forces at work in the mountain grew bolder as the hours passed, manifesting more audibly in the rustling leaves and the shifting mist that seemed to cloak every surface. Kaori felt an unyielding pressure in the air, as though the entire wilderness was holding its breath in anticipation of an event too powerful to be foreseen. The oppressive energy of the cursed domain began to seep into her thoughts, filling her with equal parts dread and determination. Despite the overwhelming odds, she pressed on, her every step infused with a steadfast resolve to unravel the layers of sorrow and uncover the truth hidden within the realm of eternal twilight. At one particularly harrowing juncture, Kaori discovered a cavern partially concealed by the gnarled limbs of an ancient pine. The cavern's entrance was marked with a series of etched symbols that resonated with the diary's cryptic tales. The oppressive darkness beyond the threshold was palpable, drawing her in like a forlorn invitation from a forgotten past. As she stepped into the cool, damp air of the cavern, a shiver ran down her spine. Here, the physical remnants of a long-forgotten ritual were strewn about in silent testimony to past lives marked by sorrow and unfulfilled promises. Each relic a silent guardian of the mountain's dark secrets. The cavern seemed to exist in its own timeless space, a repository of memories and spiritual echoes that defied the constraints of the natural world outside. Kaori ventured further into its depths, her path illuminated only by the faint gleam of phosphorescent moss that clung stubbornly to the jagged walls. With every careful step, she felt the weight of centuries press upon her, as if the carved history on the stone was reaching out to imprint its sorrow on her soul. The air was thick with a combination of damp earth and lingering melancholy. Each moment inside the cavern, an immersion into the muted lament of a spirit both vengeful and despairing. Within the somber confines of the cave, Kaori stumbled upon a secondary passageway, marked by even more intricate carvings, a record of ancient rituals, and the suffering of those who had been sacrificed in the name of appeasement. The inscriptions were a sorrowful map of the mountain's many scars, each symbol a powerful echo of a life taken in quiet torment. Although the details were blurred by time and the natural erosion of the stone, the imagery conveyed a raw narrative of regret and vengeance. A narrative that struck a deep chord within Kaori, resonating with her own memories of loss. It was in these silent inscriptions that the link between the supernatural and the human spirit was both laid bare and enveloped in profound mystery. Emerging from the cavern with a collection of newfound clues, Kaori re-entered the maelstrom of the storm-tossed wilderness, only to find that the oppressive atmosphere had grown even more tangible. The darkness now seemed to carry a will of its own, pressing against her with an almost sentient persistence that both haunted and guided her steps. With every rustle of the trees and each echo from the distant ravines, the mountain's formidable secret was distilled into a foreboding presence. Despite the inherent danger, Kaori's determination to piece together the tragic puzzle of the cursed land only deepened, her resolve solidifying in the face of a force that bridged realms and defied the natural order. With the weight of the past pressing in, Kaori's journey began to take on an introspective quality, where every step forward was matched by an internal confrontation with her own memories and regrets. The isolation of the mountains forced her to confront the myriad choices that had brought her to this pivotal moment, a crossroads of destiny and despair. In the quiet intervals between the surreal encounters and the relentless pursuit by an unseen force, she contemplated the delicate balance between fate and free will, recognizing that her path was not solely dictated by the malevolent spirit of the mountain. Instead, it was interwoven with her own innate desire to atone for past missteps and find redemption within the shadows of sorrow. As the night deepened into an almost perpetual twilight, the labyrinthine trails grew ever more treacherous, and Kaori began to notice an unsettling synchronicity between her own heartbeat and the rhythmic cadence of the mountain's whispered lamentations. The natural world, alive with a spectral tension, seemed to pulse with the energy of suppressed secrets, each gust of wind echoing a cry from those lost in the annals of time. Steeling herself against the encroaching dread, Kaori continued to unravel the legacy of the cursed peak, her mind reeling with revelations that blurred the line between myth and reality. Every shadow and every carved symbol spurred her onward, merging the landscape's unfathomable past with the essence of her own life's sorrow. Along a narrow path etched precariously along a rugged cliff, Kaori encountered remnants of what appeared to be a long-abandoned campsite. Dilapidated shelter remains and scattered belongings hinted at desperate attempts to seek refuge from the relentless supernatural tempest. The echoes of voices and laughter from happier times seemed to linger in the cold air, now tainted by a profound sorrow that had long since swallowed hope. Taking a moment to ponder the plight of those who had once traversed this haunted domain, she resolved to honor their forgotten lives by finding the key to lifting the age-old cursor key, perhaps hidden within the very symbolism etched on the mountainside. The solitude of the mountain was punctuated by startling apparitions, each a fleeting glimpse into a spectral realm where lost souls wandered aimlessly. These ghostly encounters were not overwhelming in volume, but carried an intensity that sent reverberations deep into Kaori's core. With every ephemeral silhouette that darted between the trees, she felt the inescapable pull of ancient tragedies reasserting themselves. The apparitions were as much a part of the mountain's eternal lament as the etched symbols and whispered legends, each one silently urging her to confront the hidden history behind their tormented existence. In these brief moments, the mountain seemed less like a silent guardian and more like an active participant in a sorrowful play, replete with voices from an irrevocable past, despite the ever-present undercurrent of terror and melancholy. Kaori discovered small havens of unexpected beauty scattered throughout the craggy terrain. A hidden glade, illuminated by a rare break in the choking mist, offered a surreal display of moonlit flora whose delicate shadows danced gracefully against the rough, time-worn stone. In that ephemeral moment of calm, the natural world appeared to extend a hand of solace, urging her to seek balance between the darkness and the light. Yet, as the moment passed, she was once again thrust into the ominous uncertainty of the mountain, reminded that even the most serene of sanctuaries existed only to emphasize the omnipresent specter of the curse that gripped these ancient heights. In the midst of this fluctuating landscape of despair and fleeting respite, Kaori meticulously documented every clue and carved inscription she encountered. Each mark was analyzed with a careful, scholarly eye as she sought to decode the language of sorrow etched into the very bones of the mountain. The scattered diary entries, combined with the cryptic symbols and the subtle patterns observed in nature, formed a tapestry of historical grief, a silent narrative passed down by spirits who had long been forgotten by the world of the living. With each discovery, she constructed a mosaic of the mountain's tragic past, understanding that the restoration of balance might lie in acknowledging the unresolved anguish inscribed into its very being. As Kaori delved deeper into the labyrinth of stone and memory, the forest itself seemed to respond with increasing intensity to her presence. The very air grew heavier, laden with an inexplicable sorrow that resonated in the rustle of leaves and the distant clamor of unseen forces. Despite the ever-looming threat of the cursed spirit, she pressed onward with a resolve born of both compassion and a need to liberate the trapped energies of the past. Each step was a deliberate act of defiance against the despair that sought to engulf her. An affirmation that even in the heart of profound darkness, there existed the potential for renewal and understanding, if one was courageous enough to confront the ancient sorrow head-on. The journey took an unexpected turn when Kaori stumbled upon an isolated plateau, crowned by weathered stone monoliths, arranged in a deliberate, almost ritualistic formation. The arrangement of these stones appeared to be a mirror of the cosmic order, carefully aligned with the rare and intermittent streaks of moonlight that managed to pierce the dense fog. In that suspended moment between night and dawn, the symbols on the monoliths seemed to pulse with a forgotten power, and Kaori's mind raced with possibilities. Could these be the remnants of a long-lost ritual designed to quell the restless spirit? The plateau resonated with the grief of ages past, each stone a silent witness to a legacy of profound sorrow and unresolved retribution. Driven by her insatiable need for answers, Kaori began to piece together a theory that the relentless haunting was not a capricious force of nature, but rather a meticulously woven tapestry of ritual and memory. She recalled the fragile diary entries, the enigmatic inscriptions, and the spectral images that had danced at the edge of her vision. The fragments of lore pointed to a sacrificial ceremony, a final, desperate attempt to restore balance between the living and the dead. Each discovery, every cryptic sign, led her closer to a resolution that was as elusive as it was essential. The cumulative sorrow of the mountain whispered a challenge in the wind, a call to confront the very fabric of its ancient curse. The oppressive silence that blanketed the trail was shattered by intermittent, haunting melodies that drifted through the air, seemingly played on instruments crafted from the whispers of grief. Kaori paused at each new sound, discerning that these ethereal harmonies were not random, but intricately tied to the ancient language of the land. The resonant tones echoed from hidden crevices in the mountainside and from the depths of shadowed hollows, offering fleeting glimpses into a time when the mountain's inhabitants revered the supernatural. In every note, there was a lament for lost souls and unmet vengeance, a spectral symphony that both chilled her to the bone and beckoned her deeper into the heart of the sorrowful mystery. As time stretched and merged with the endless night, Kaori began to lose track of the conventional markers of day and night. The mountain's temporal rhythm had its own language, one that was composed of the slow rotation of the fog and the almost meditative cadence of her heartbeat in the profound stillness. With her senses heightened to every rustle, every brush of the wind, she perceived that the mountain was almost alive with an intangible memory. The slow, inexorable pacing of her journey forced her to confront not only the external horrors, but also the inner darkness that had long lurked within her. A darkness that now found a mirror in the relentless shrouded depths of the mountain's soul. The relentless expedition through the wilderness gradually revealed the dual nature of the mountain. A realm of sublime, indifferent beauty intermingled with an underlying current of ancient grief. Clara, traversing perilous ledges and treacherous trails, found herself caught in a paradox where each breathtaking vista was tinged with the melancholy of a long-forgotten tragedy. Here, the interplay of nature and spirit was as delicate as it was decisive. The delicate balance between the acknowledgement of sorrow and the desperate struggle for survival resonated in every gust of wind and every eerie silence, echoing the eternal question of whether one can ever truly escape the shadows of the past. In a rare moment of stillness, Kaori sought refuge atop a plateau, surrounded by a circular arrangement of weathered boulders. The setting was almost serene, a stark contrast to the earlier chaos that had defined her journey. The panoramic view of the moonlit mountain range, shrouded in an undulating mist, was both mesmerizing and melancholic, evoking memories of times when hope and despair dance in tandem. As she settled into a quiet vigil, the wind whispered soft recollections of the mountain's tragic history, a tapestry of sorrow and resilience that had been silently woven through centuries. In that reflective pause, she felt an intimate connection with every lost soul whose lament had become inseparable from the very essence of the wilderness. Reinvigorated by this reflective interlude, Kaori resumed her journey with a renewed sense of purpose. The spectral guidance of the mountain's eerie whispers seemed to converge upon her, urging her to seek out the nexus where the physical and spiritual realms intertwined. The narrow winding paths led her to a secluded ridge where ancient stones formed an altar-like formation, each one etched with fading symbols of a bygone era. This eerie monument, seemingly placed with deliberate intent by unknown hands, resonated deeply with the fractured lore she had been piecing together. It was here that she sensed the answer to the enigma might lie a truth, waiting to be unearthed from layers of sorrow and unfulfilled destiny. As Kaori approached the ancient altar, the environment around her shifted into an almost tangible hush, as though the mountain itself paused in anticipation of her next step. The dim light revealed intricate carvings that depicted a ritual of remembrance and reparation, a ceremonial plea for forgiveness from a realm burdened by forgotten grievances. Her heart pounded with the realization that the key to releasing the mountain from its perpetual state of gloom lay in acknowledging the deep-seated sorrow of the past. Each inscription told a story of sacrifice, regret, and the hope for eventual absolution, urging her to offer herself as a bridge between the living world and the spectral remnants of those long departed. In that silent communion with the mountain's ancient memory, Kaori found herself enveloped in an overwhelming sense of responsibility. The ritualistic inscriptions seemed to awaken something dormant within her, a deep recognition that her journey was not one of mere happenstance, but of profound destiny. The elements around her converged into a chorus of mournful harmonies that transcended time and space, affirming that the mountain's sorrow was an echo of universal loss. Moved by this shared grief, she resolved to perform the ancient ritual she had slowly come to understand through scattered clues, even as the chilling presence of the supernatural threatened to overwhelm her delicate sense of reality. As the inky blackness of night reached its zenith, the mountain's spectral inhabitant stirred with a renewed fervor, manifesting more tangibly in the shifting fog. The presence was felt, rather than seen, a cold, sorrowful wind that carried with it the weight of centuries, mingled with faint, anguished sighs that reverberated against the rugged landscape. Kaori, now armed with both the knowledge gleaned from ancient texts and the intuitive language of the cursed land, recognized that she was on the precipice of a transformative encounter. Every element of the wilderness, the relentless howling wind, the mysterious symbols carved into stone, and the silent pleas of unseen forces converged into a singular, overwhelming force that demanded her attention and resolve. With her heart in tumult and her mind focused on the delicate balance between dread and hope, Kaori initiated the first steps of the fabled ritual, under the ghostly luminescence of the rare moonbeam, and in the company of a darkness so profound it seemed almost sentient. She recited the incantations found woven among the diary's fragmented lore. The air itself vibrated with a strange, resonant energy, as if the mountain was both observing and questioning her bold defiance of its ancient decree. In that precarious moment, every sound and movement was amplified, and the very boundaries of the physical world blurred as the supernatural crescendo built toward a climax that promised either release or inevitable despair. In the eerie minutes that followed, a palpable tension wove itself through the fabric of the mountain's oppressive silence. Kaori's voice, steady yet laced with trepidation, filled the space between the ancient stones, each word an invocation meant to bridge the chasm between mortal understanding and the realm of the restless spirit. The ritual unfolded slowly, each pause laden with the echoes of an old grief that had transcended time. As the words reverberated off the cold surfaces of the altar-like boulders, the wind carried their resonance into the furthest crevices of the wilderness, binding her voice with the sorrow of a land that had long been marred by unhealed scars. With the ritual deep in its incantatory crescendo, the mountain responded with a fury of nature's own design. The swirling mist thickened as if summoned by the ancient words, and the silent forces that dwelled in the shadows began to coalesce around the clearing. A deep, resonant hum underpinned the cacophony of distant echoes, while the symbolic inscriptions glowed faintly in acknowledgement of the ritual's solemn intent. Kaori, though overtaken by a sense of overwhelming isolation and dread, maintained her focus, a steadfast determination that the unspoken sorrow of the mountain could be both understood and, perhaps, redeemed, if only the ritual reached its destined conclusion. As the final verses of the incantation left her lips, an ethereal calm descended momentarily across the mountain, as if the relentless presence paused to listen. In that fleeting tranquility, the world seemed to hold its breath, and the boundary between the tangible and the supernatural softened to a near translucent veil. Kaori could feel the gentle push of ancient energies guiding her hand, as though the sorrow of a countless past was acknowledging her sincere endeavor to bring peace to a restless spirit. The overwhelming quiet spoke volumes about the power of unresolved grief and the possibility of atonement. A delicate promise that even in the darkest of places, reconciliation could be a bridge to renewed hope. In the final moments of that fateful night, as Kaori slowly retreated from the sanctified altar, amidst the still lingering whispers of a reconciled past, the mountain of fear exhaled its sorrow into the enveloping mist. The ancient curse, having been confronted through years of offering, symbolism, and deep introspection, now lay in a fragile state of reprieve, its fateful energies seemingly abated, if only for a temporary interlude of calm. Kaori knew that the journey had left an indelible mark on her spirit, a testament to the quiet power of resolve, compassion, and the unyielding strength to face one's inner demons. As she made her way back along the treacherous paths, each echoing footstep resonated with both the melancholy of the past and the fragile promise of future redemption, leaving an open-ended invitation to those who dared to seek the mysterious truth hidden amidst the eternal gloom of the mountain.